All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here today. Before we begin, I would like to welcome the director of our Native American Indigenous Studies program at UT, Dr. Luis Carcamo Huachante, who will offer a welcome and land acknowledgement.
Good afternoon. Welcome to everyone. I am Luis Carcamo Huachante from the Mapuche people, and I am the director of the program in Native American and Indigenous Studies here at the University of Texas at Austin. First, in the context of this event, I would like to recognize and thank the presence of all the Native American and or Indigenous attendees and participants, particularly my gratitude to the work and presence in this event of our elder Marika Alvarado and artist Will Wilson, as well as a recognition towards the leading work of Kayla Shidin to make this gathering a reality. Also, I would like to recognize that this event takes place online, aware that virtual spaces and technological devices have environmental consequences on Earth. As a guest in these indigenous homelands, and on behalf of the program in Native American and Indigenous Studies at the University of Texas at Austin, it is an honor for me to share the following land acknowledgement. I would like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the indigenous lands of Turtle Island, the ancestral name for what now is called North America. Moreover, I would like to acknowledge the Alabama Coachata, Caddo, Carrizo Comecrudo, Coahuiltecan, Comanche, Kickapoo, Lipan Apache, Isleta del Sur Pueblo, and Tonkawa, and all the American Indian and indigenous peoples and communities who have been or have become a part of these lands and territories here in Texas. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Carcamo Huachante. And thank you also to you and the program and Native American Indigenous Studies for being an esteemed co-sponsor of this event and of your support throughout this exhibition. I would also like to offer a thank you to our gallery manager, Claire Donnelly, and our gallery director, Mackenzie Stevens, for assisting in this event today. A lot of people have been attending a lot of virtual events, and there's a lot of background work that happens to make these events go smoothly. And I'd like to thank both of them for being here and assisting us with this today. And I would also like to thank the many co-sponsors of this exhibition who have made this entire project possible. This has been a labor of love, and I am very grateful to everyone who has stepped up and assisted and offered their assistance throughout this project. So thank you to them. And a couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. This talk is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube page and the event page afterwards. So for those who can't make it, or if you have friends who you know who can't be here, please feel free to share that with them once we have it online. And people are free to leave questions in the Q&A section throughout this chat, and we will reserve time at the end of the talk to answer those with both of our speakers. So just to describe a little bit about the structure of this event before we get started. We are welcoming two speakers today who will both give individual talks, and then at the end of that we will all come back together and I'll facilitate a conversation, and after that we will have a group discussion with questions from the audience. So please, again, feel free to write in your questions in the Q&A throughout or at the end. So this conversation today is part of the exhibition Will Wilson Air Survey, which is on view at the VAC, the Visual Arts Center, until March 27th. And I have the honor of being joined today by Ms. Marika Alvarado and Will Wilson to discuss a collaboration that has been central to the show. It is an installation titled Autoimmune Response Lab, or AIR Lab for short. It brings together a pre-existing Hogan structure built by Wilson with local indigenous plants cultivated by Ms. Alvarado and her apprentice E.B. Carr, allowing AIR Lab to become a catalyst for conversations about the importance of maintaining indigenous plant life, well-being, and the environment. So I'll introduce our two speakers before they get started. Marika Alvarado is a Lipan Mescalero Apache medicine woman based in Central Texas here in Austin. She is the founder of the Earth Institute of Indigenous Cultures and Teachings and is a direct descendant of generations of medicine women, traditional native healers of spirit and body, midwives, and plant medicine practitioners. Her mother, grandmother, and aunt handed the medicine down to her. As a child, she was taught the traditional way as her family intended those who came to them in need. She believes in teaching all people who have the dedication and spiritual will to use these teachings as Mother Earth and the generations before her intended. Will Wilson is a Diné or Navajo photographer who spent his formative years living in the Navajo Nation. He studied photography at the University of New Mexico and Oberlin College, and he has held visiting professorships at the Institute of American Indian Arts, Oberlin College, and the University of Arizona. Since 2014, he has been the head of the photography program at Santa Fe Community College. And Wilson has received a number of fellowships and awards in support of his practice in recent years, including the Rollin and Mary Ella King Fellowship at the School for Advanced Research in Santa Fe, a Pollock Krasner Foundation grant in photography, the New Mexico Governor's Excellence in Art Award, and a Mentor Artist Fellowship with the Native American Arts and Cultures Foundation. And Wilson is the Spring 2021 Artist in Residence at the BAC. So thank you both. Thank both of our speakers for being here today. And at this point, I would like to open the stage to Ms. Marika Alvarado, who will give us an exciting talk about the plants that are in the exhibition.
Yatanahe, greetings. Thank you, all of you, for joining me. I am so grateful and humble when I have young people asking me to be part of their project. So I was very excited when Kayla was telling me about Will and his project and the work he does. And it's so beautiful. And I'm so excited to see his next journeys. So thank you so much. And I'm sorry, I'm not very high tech. And I'm also getting over a little cold. So today I was going to show you some of the plants, and I did make a little flyer that will be handed out later on. And I have someone walking with me so you can see the plants. So we're going to start off with these particular plants here at the beginning of here. I grow all different types of tobacco plants. This particular plant is for women's health. This is a night blooming tobacco. And as you can see, the flowers are white and a beautiful pink. So to us, it's about doing ceremonies and having them done in baths for the women to support them, because this plant is connected to the moon. So that's one thing that to me is very important, is understanding how much ceremony we do with these plants. All right, my next plant that we have here is Sun Opener. It's Sinasuchi, and that is a Nawa name. And so because we believe that sometimes you cannot do healing in the physical world, we have to go into the dream world to do healing. And so I journey with these people. And so this is a plant that we would use to do the same thing of healing work. This one is Kalia. And so it puts out beautiful flowers. I love the way it smells. But this plant is also about healing in the dream world, because again, you can't always heal in the physical world. So it's about going into that journey and going in and taking care of people that way. This particular plant that we have here, it's not blooming yet, but the grow lights, it's very happy. It's Spanish needle. And this is a wonderful plant. It has been used for many, many generations. It's also for helping and preventative HPV. And because our ancestors already had known a little bit about how we need to take care of our women, but it's a beautiful antibiotic type of plant. And so we'll move to the next plant. This one is daga, and this puts out these beautiful orange flowers that you make a tea with. And again, this is also about going into the dream world to do healing work that way. And so that's how we use that. And so our next plant is the honey mesquite. We're losing this tree a lot here in Texas, believe it or not, because a lot of the ranchers will cut them down so that way the cattle can move through a little bit easier. But this entire tree you can use for medicine. It has been used for medicine for many, many years. It's a high protein and a low glycemic index. So this is a plant that you can use for diabetics, and it's just completely good food. So whether you're using the leaves for pink eye, or whether you're using the seed pods to make ground up, and I make cookies out of it. A lot of people make breads and things like that. And that's a high protein. So I know you will probably be asking questions, so we will definitely get back with that. This is a beautiful tree. He's kind of struggling in here right now, but as you can see that tree, the way it barks and it moves and everything, this is Ibano. And I love Ibano. This plant came to us. From Central America, and then it gravitates up towards Texas. We are losing. You will see them more in the valley area as opposed to here, because here we're over. We're over tearing up the land just to build more housing, more apartments and things. So they just kind of tear the trees down. They don't really pay attention to what type of tree, if it isn't an oak or a cedar. So this beautiful tree is wonderful. So Ibano has a high oil content in the barks and stuff. So people use them always for lighting. So to light the way, to light the path. And so that's why a lot of times in ceremonies, these were given to the people, because it would stay lit. So it's a beautiful little plant. And our next plant, as you can see, it's a Mexican olive tree. And the Mexican olive tree is really a wonderful plant also. Of course, I love all my little plants. But anyway, so that is great for upper body issues like bronchitis, any type of respiratory issues. This would be the plant you would use. So you could use the leaves, you can use the flowers and the seed pods. And a lot of times people would create a tea out of that, and then what was left over was mushed and then applied to the chest area. So that way it would clear everything and detox that way also. Okay, our next plant is a Mexican honeysuckle, muicli. Everybody knows this beautiful plant. It's a wonderful anti-inflammatory. And so you're using the teas, you're using the flowers. So it's really something that I would give my elder people for arthritis, something that you're going to try to bring all that inflammation down. And so it's a mild diuretic. And so that's really what's the beauty of this particular plant. They do use that plant a lot for landscaping. So that's the good thing. We're not going to lose that plant. This is a Mexican sycamore. So in Texas, it's either a Texas or a Mexican plant. So anyway, and the Mexican sycamore is almost like a maple. So as I was a kid, my mom would make all our syrups out of there. There's a lot of water in these trees. And so that's why you're also going to see infestations of bugs and things, because there is a lot of water. So if you were thirsty, you could cut some of this up and then let it sit, and you would be amazed how much water really drains out of it, and you could drink that. So I guess we could have thought about that when we had that cold freeze. Oops, sorry, I'm dropping my little ear pods. Okay, so this is a Mexican cinnamon. And so this is a really important little tree. And most of the spices that were brought into Mexico were brought in by the Moors. And so that's why you'll see all these beautiful spices. You don't really see this growing here. You're going to see it a little bit maybe in East Texas because it does need a little bit more moisture. But this is a Ceylon cinnamon. And the reason that Mexico gravitates for that particular cinnamon as opposed to other cinnamons is because this really helps with altitude illness. So it's not just about helping people with diabetes, you know, as cinnamon normally does, but this is something for altitude. And so people that are traveling towards mountains and then coming back down to the valleys, they would always have their cinnamon sticks with them, okay? And so that's really important. Okay. Our next tree is kidney wood, but here in Texas, they know it as vara dulce. This plant is a very strong diuretic. And so that's why a lot of people use this particular plant for kidney situations, you know, whether you have kidney stones or a strong urinary tract infection. This is some plant that you're going to be able to use. You don't see this plant here in Austin. You will have to go all the way down to San Antonio to start seeing them. Because like I said, in Austin, if they don't really recognize the trees, they'll just start cutting everything down. But it's really a beautiful tree. And a lot of people also know it as palo azul. And so they use a lot of palo azul, and you're using all that bark area if you're really needing that diuretic effect. Okay. This particular tree, I love it. It gets confused very easily. And I'm sorry, you'll see these piggybacks in here. This isn't part of the tree. This is your tree that you're looking at. This is retama. Retama gets confused with palo verde, and they are two different types of trees, and they do two different types of medicine. But this one, you can use the leaves and the flowers for urinary tract infection. So when somebody's telling you things like that, that's telling me that this tree is a very, it's a diuretic, obviously, and it's just wonderful for flushing the body out. And so that's really what you're paying attention to. And so when I teach my classes, that's what I usually try to tell my students, to pay attention to what the plant really does so you don't get yourself confused, because otherwise a lot of the plants will almost do the same thing. So, okay. So our next tree, I love this guy. He just fills up with the most beautiful flowers. If you head down towards the valley, you're going to see them in large groves out there. And it's the Texas black bush, or they know it as chaparro prieto. And this is a wonderful, wonderful little tree. Like I said, the flowers almost look like a mesquite tree. And so what this is used is for people that are diabetic or women that had children and they want to lose weight, because it's really a weight loss. So don't run down there and start chopping it. It's a way that you're going to take it and use it before you use it for weight loss, okay? Okay, so here we come to the Texas gumweed. And I live in Williamson County area, and I do see small about pieces growing. We used to have a lot of it growing here, and I don't see it too much. But in Spanish, they know it as yebra de buey. So yebra de buey is great for congestion. Anything that's upper body, anything that needs to be flushed out. It's a really antimicrobial plant. This is really wonderful. And as you see the bright yellow flowers, when they're blooming, they look gummy. And that's why people call that the way it is. Okay. So our next tree is the wild Mexican oregano. This is a hard plant to find. It grows in shrubs, and you really do have a hard time finding it. What they're selling you at the nurseries and stuff, that's not really Mexican oregano. This is the real Mexican oregano. And all you have to do is barely touch the leaves and you can smell how strong this is. So in Mexico, they make all kinds of medicines with it, tinctures, balms, everything, because it's really wonderful. Now, I try to tell everybody, oreganos work on lower part of the body, not the upper part. So this is a plant that if you're having a little infection or a situation going on that you feel you need to take, also if you want to take it with, if you already have a urinary tract infection, then this is something that you would take. Anything working below the navel, this plant would work that way. It's really important that we learn how plants work, whether it's up or down, and how do we pay attention to that. Okay. Okay, our next plant is leather stem, and he's very happy here. He's filling up with leaves and he will be blooming pretty soon. And it puts out these clusters downward of little purple flowers, and it's really pretty. But if you were to drive in the summertime on the road out towards the valley or something, they look like sticks sitting out in the middle of nowhere. So you think they're dead, but they're not dead. So they call it sangre de dago. And this is a really wonderful plant because if you were to break off a piece, it looks like blood pouring out. And so that latex is really what a lot of the people are using, okay? And I'm always very careful about what I tell people how to use things, because otherwise everybody runs out and tries to do it themselves. And so anyway, okay, so this beautiful little tree, as you can see, is blooming. It's a really beautiful tree. It's part of the mimosas, the acacias. So we got a lot of acacias here in Texas. You're not going to see this tree here. You're going to have to go farther out south or west to see it. This is a very toxic tree. And the reason people keep it is to control bugs, control anything that infestations and things like that. So that's why you really wanted to keep the tree. So traditionally to us, everything has a purpose, so you don't want to remove it. And so his purpose is to take care of your garden. So this is something that you should really keep around. And so that's why I'm saying in traditional ways, we don't want to ever get rid of things because everything has a purpose. Everything is connected, okay? So this one here is the Texas torch wood. It grows pretty good size. They're trying to bring this tree back because they're noticing how important it is. It's not important just for the birds and the animals and things like this, but this tree puts nitrogen back into our soil. And so that's why we really need this. We don't need to get rid of things that are constantly feeding everything. And this also is a tree that has a lot of like a creosote, so you could light it and torch it. And that's why they refer to it as a torch. So, okay, our next one. And like I said, you have to kind of forgive all the little piggybacks that get involved in here. They're not part of the plan. They just kind of tagged along. So this is goat bush. And here a lot of people recognize it as armagoso, because that's exactly what it is. It is very bitter. I don't care if you put honey in this thing, it's going to be bitter. But it's wonderful for removing parasites. And it's wonderful for dysentery, for anything that you need to really flush your system out and help you out. And that's what we were talking about in class is I have a little office in a medical clinic, and a lot of the people that I'm seeing nowadays, because they're eating organic foods, they do have a lot of parasites. And so that's what I do is I recommend different plants for them to take. and that will help flush their systems out. I'm sorry, are you okay? The young woman that's holding my phone and camera, she had this look on her eyes when I said parasites. She was like, ah. Okay, so the next one is manzanita. That's what it is known here. It's a burberry. And this is what we have here growing in Texas. And this is a beautiful tree. I just love it. I did see one growing at the City of Austin building. I noticed that it seems to be very happy there. But you're going to use the leaves, you're going to use the berries, you can use the young thin branches and stuff like this. This is a wonderful antibiotic, antiseptic plant. A lot of the people use the leaves and dry them out for smoking. So it's otherwise known as kinnikinnick. If you go up north, that's usually what people will ask for because they're pipe carriers and they're wanting to use kinnikinnick. And so that's what we have here is this. I'm sorry, I keep losing my earplugs. Okay, our next one is cenizo, the Texas sage. And again, as you can notice, everything's labeled either Texas or Mexican. Anyway, so this beautiful plant, you will see it growing all over the place. They use it a lot for landscaping because it does put out these beautiful purple flowers. So traditionally, as my grandmother says, when the plant has the purple flowers, we're not allowed to touch it, gather it, and know that this plant is praying. The plant is asking for water. So it puts out these beautiful purple flowers and it's asking Creator to send rain down. And so to us, this is the way we're going to honor this plant is we don't touch it. But once it does not have the purple flowers, then we are going to catch all the little young tops and trim those off and make a wonderful tea for sinus infections, because sinus infections are really hard to get to because they're up and trapped in this area. This plant is something that's going to work up that high up. And so to us, that's really important to take care of, respecting the plant and knowing when to harvest and gather. Okay. And here is one of our lacy oaks. We have many oaks in Texas, but I teach people which ones they can eat and which ones they can't. Okay, so what I want when I ask people to come out and look at the plants with me, what I'm teaching you is paying attention to the leaf. You're wanting that round leaf. If you see it spiky and pointy, it's too acidic. You cannot eat it. It'll really bother your stomach. You don't want to cause that irritation. This plant you can eat once those acorns are ready. Then you can grind them, turn them into muffins, turn them into breads, whatever it is that you want to make with them. Okay. Okay, our next thing, because it was so funny, nobody had ever seen them, but I collect all the cactus roots. And this is from a 3-pad cactus. So you can only imagine how long they really are. That's why they don't die. Okay, so once you're collecting the cactus root, they're a wonderful medicine for buffering. So, when I create medicine, I'm paying attention to what's really going on with that person. So if they have a person with indigestion or bowel irritation, I'm going to include some of that cactus root, grind it all up, mix it in with their other medicine. So that way it doesn't irritate the stomach. It's going to help and it's going to buffer that. And so it's really a wonderful medicine. And so here comes our cactuses. We have 2 cactuses here. This particular one, it's kind of small, but this is the one you will probably see growing everywhere. And a lot of people know this plant as the good life, La Buena Vida. Okay. And then this one is the cow's ear. As you can see, this one's a little bit thinner, a lot more thorns. So that's what I try to educate people to understand. When it's this thin, it's more acidic. When it's nice and fat and juicy this way, this is what you're wanting. And this is the wonderful medicine. This one is very acidic, so this one, we're going to use it for the bottoms of people's feet to help pull, because it's very astringent. So you're wanting to do that if there's a fever or other issues that you could do it. So you would just peel it all the way, and then I would make the size of the foot of this person, and then I would attach it to them and let them sit there, and we would visit. I would share my tea with them, and then they feel better. So that's the beauty of the way we take care of people. Okay, so this one is one of my favorites. This is agarita. So as my grandmother used to say, this is one of our sacred plants because this is a very powerful plant. When the leaves are young, you can use them, you can chew on them. And as you can see, once they get older, they're like holly. So they're going to really poke you. And that's why they call the plant agrito, because you're going to scream when you touch it, because it will. But it puts out these beautiful berries. And a lot of people make jellies out of them because it's antibacterial, antimicrobial. But what we concentrate on is the medicine and the root system. It's a big, beautiful, bright yellow. And that's what we would grind up and mix with clay and put on, I'm sorry, my earbud, and put it on as face paint. It's a bright, beautiful yellow. And the horses were painted with that also. And so that's why to us, it was considered a very sacred plant. We don't dig it up unless we absolutely need it. And so most of the concentration of medicine will be in that root system. So it's part of the berberine, and that's why it looks the color that it does. Okay, our last plant is mullein, of course. You will see this growing everywhere. Sorry, I keep losing my earbuds. You use the entire plant also. So whether you're using it for respiratory issues, that's what you're using the leaves for and stuff. A lot of people also smoke it, the leaves, they're going to dry them. Then it puts out this beautiful shoot with yellow flowers. I mix the yellow flowers with the garlic, make some beautiful ear medicine for children, especially when they have a lot of ear infections. This will help it clear all up. The root system, I use the root system also for pain, for migraines, headaches, and things like that. And that's what I'm really taking care of. But I love this whole plant, and it just makes me happy, and it seems to be very happy here. Well, thank you very much. I'm finished with my talk. So I know you'll probably have a little bit of questions later. So thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Marika. I know people have lots of questions, and we are so grateful to you for sharing your knowledge with us. So we'll look forward to talking to you again afterwards. And now I'd like to welcome Will Wilson on.
Thank you, Kayla, and thank you so much, Maria. That was truly amazing and pretty moving. It's kind of I think like seeing the fruition of an idea coming through collaboration. So I thank you so much. Your plants are amazing, and I think that they really kind of take, you know, that piece and the intention to where it's awesome. I'm sorry, where it's meant to be, where it's meant to go. So I think I'll just kind of contextualize, give a little context to that that sculpture, the Autoimmune Response Laboratory, or Air Lab. You know, it's based on a customary architectural form, right? Like a Navajo hogan, traditional Navajo house. One room, round structure, a doorway that always faces east to greet the sun. And it's something that, you know, I think has informed a lot of my thinking about how I want to present, well, initially my photography, so that it would give people a sense of space and architecture, and kind of transform the way that you receive the work, right? So you're kind of in some ways forced to become a participant just because of the architectural relationship between your own body and the space. And like I said, it's so heartwarming and moving to see Marika's knowledge and wisdom and those incredible beings kind of filling that space. Really powerful. I'm going to shift to share a PowerPoint, or a little bit of a PowerPoint, just to talk a little bit more about the autoimmune response project. Oops. I'm not sure which, let me just start that again, sorry. Okay, share, and I'm gonna go to this slide, and okay. So I believe you're looking at the first image in the autoimmune response series. I started this back in 2004, and it's really this kind of story, or this narrative, it's ongoing, of like a Navajo man trying to figure out what's happened to the world. In this image on the far right, far left, there's kind of photoshopped in Nevada test site nuclear explosion in the distance, and so that cloud mixed with all of these other clouds is kind of this harbinger of things to come. The title autoimmune response is a it's the title that kind of informs, I think, the main idea behind this, and I think that it speaks to kind of indigenous knowledge, plants, and the wisdom to know how to interact with them on some level. Native American kind of peoples are particularly affected by autoimmune disease. And, a lot of that has been associated with really quick, sudden changes in like foodways, lifeways, environment, kind of economies, which is the result of colonization and kind of a separation of indigenous people from those customary kind of knowledges. So it's not just about the disease, it's also about a response, right? And so this character, through the course of these images, is trying to figure out how to survive, how to live, how to respond, and move forward. There's some reference to the Navajo creation story in this work. That's also, I think, moving towards this idea of how to, again, respond and move forward. And so by the end of the first series, the protagonist, he builds his own kind of home, his shelter, because you need shelter to exist in kind of the post-apocalyptic universe, right? And so he makes a hogan, and this was actually the very first iteration of this project, and the hogan was surrounded by the large photographs. Some kind of shots about context and research in relation to working on this project, but I was thinking about how this could evolve and how we could move forward with the idea, and it came to me the idea of food, right? Because you have to eat as well as have shelter when you're in this space, and so I think the first version of this happened in 2009, maybe 2011, somewhere in that time frame. I started transforming the initial Hogan structure into a laboratory for the production and cultivation of indigenous food species. So I was in Tucson, Arizona at the time, and there's an organization called Native Seed Search there that is kind of like a food bank in some ways, or a seed bank, sorry, for indigenous food species of the, the Southwest, Northern Mexico, that region. And they actively kind of collect and then propagate on their farm these amazing, food species. And another way that I like to think about this is this, technology that's been developed over, thousands of years in relation to these beings and the environment, right? So Native Seed Search has a great program. They gift seed to people of the indigenous communities of the Southwest for free. So I would highly recommend that you check out that place, that resource. But so that kicked off this notion of the Air Lab, and it kind of has become a sort of site-specific installation. This is at the Santa Fe Art Institute, and in this case, I kind of planted a herb garden because I wanted the residents of the residency program to be able to come out and, pick basil for their sauces, or, there was tomatillo, there was some green chili. So, that was the kind of idea behind this. I've also had the opportunity to exhibit this work at a botanical garden in Denver. And they allowed me to use some of their greenhouses to propagate some of the seed and the species. And it also kind of became a backdrop for kind of an extension of this narrative, the autoimmune response narrative, right? And so it's also, I think, about kind of imaging a dream. I would love on some level to actually, develop this into a real project where, the cultivation of these species happens on a little bit more of an industrial scale, and that we have actual kind of professional level greenhouses, which are amazing kind of structures in and of themselves. I mean, this building was really responding to kind of the input and the need of the plants, with a bunch of kind of sensors and, some monitoring software. If the soil got dry, the steamer would kick on. If it was too hot in there, the vents would open. Anyway, I thought it was kind of a remarkable a remarkable way to think about kind of architecture and a plant interacting with that. So I'm going to jump out of this now that you have a little bit of context. And I guess some of the things that I was thinking about when Marika was talking about her work, and what she's kind of, collaboratively created in that space at the Visual Arts Center, is this notion of, with my autoimmune response project, how it is a response, and how, I guess, amplifying, sharing the knowledge of these food ways and plant ways is something that that project wants to kind of point to, right? That there are kind of traditional knowledges, indigenous knowledges that have been developed over the course of a really, long and thought out research period, that exist and that are resources that we need to kind of make sure that we hold on to and activate. And I think that, Marika's work is doing that very important kind of mission. Something else that came to mind in her discussion of her plants, in terms of the autoimmune response project, there was a study done, and I think it was indigenous people along the US Mexican-American border. And I think it was the Tahana Odom community in particular, and perhaps Yaqui as well, but you know, to a large extent, the folks on the Mexican side of the border had kind of maintained a lot of their traditional knowledges. One thing that made me think about that was the use of the mesquite and the mesquite pods ground up to make this amazing kind of low glucose, high protein flour. And that, you know, that kind of economic separation in some ways, and the, you know, kind of adherence to more customary foodways resulted in the folks in Mexico being much healthier, essentially, than the folks on the US side of things. And then just on a really personal level, when I was in college, I found out that I have an antigen that puts me at risk of this autoimmune disease called Reiter syndrome. And I had eaten some bad chicken or something and ended up with salmonella food poisoning. And right when I was kind of getting through that, I had this reaction. And I woke up one morning and I could not walk. I could not get out of bed. The joints on my legs and my shoulders and my elbows swelled up, like to such a degree that it was incredibly painful for me to kind of move. And I actually had to take the semester off. And I went back home. Well, I went to where my mom was at the time, which was in Patagonia, Arizona, about 10 miles from the Mexican-American border. And, you know, nobody could figure out what was going on with me. Eventually somebody at the Indian Health Service there in, well, south of Tucson was able to kind of diagnose the Reiter syndrome. And I started taking some medications, you know, to treat that, sulfasalazines, I think they were. But something else we did was my mom knew a Yaqui woman who was a traditional healer, and she kind of did ceremony on me and gave me a prescription for this tea that was made in part from creosote. It was, you know, really intense and hard to ingest, but, you know, almost immediately after I started taking that, I began my recovery. And, you know, since then I've been fine. So I don't know, it's just a kind of remarkable thing to see kind of this collaboration unfold. And yeah, I just thank you deeply. Really excited about it. And this resource guide that you all have put together is pretty remarkable and informative.
All right, thank you so much, Will. That's great. And we'll go ahead and invite Ms. Alvarado back on. I'm really excited to hear both of you speak together. And again, I just have to say that it's been amazing and powerful to see this collaboration unfold between the both of you, and to witness the power of both of your practices coming together. And I'm incredibly grateful to have been a part of that and to see it happening. And I hope people are, if you're interested in coming to the exhibition to see some of these plants yourself and to learn more, we definitely encourage that. We're open until March 27th. So if you're in Austin, please do come by. Okay, so it looks like we have both of you back now. So at this point, I wanted to just kind of get the conversation going with kind of something I was thinking about as Ms. Marika was speaking about all these plants and watching just how amazing it is seeing all these things coming together in the gallery space. I was wondering if Ms. Marika, you could just talk about the process of what it was like when we started talking about cultivating these plants and putting them in the exhibition. And I know the timeline ended up being really tricky. And so I just wanted to hear you talk and hear your perspective on how that all unfolded.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I thought it was very interesting as you and I were talking, Kayla. I was pushing back as much as I could because I was afraid it was too hard on the plants, considering it was winter time, trying to make them look, available, because at winter they're usually pretty dormant. And then, as I was mentioning to you, this winter happens to be very, very hard. I lost most of the plants. So the plants that I have sitting in here are the ones that survived. So I thought, okay, what are the odds of that? And so I kept thinking about Will and thinking about you, because I kept saying, no, we got to slow down, slow down. And then I'm like, this is all I have left now. So now I got to start all over again. So anyway, and thank you so much, Will. That was a beautiful story about that healer. So that sounds like they gave you chaparral, the creosote bush, which to us, we believe sometimes you need poison to heal poison. And so that's why when you were saying that, I was like, oh, wow, yes. We love that plant, and I love that plant. It smells beautiful. So anyway, thank you.
Okay, I mean, at this point, I think I have some questions. There's a lot of interaction going on in the Q&A as well. So I'll maybe ask a question, and then if you all have some back and forth you want to do, that's great. And then we'll just start going with some of the audience questions, because there's some really interesting ones. And I think people are really looking forward to hearing from both of you directly. So I guess I am kind of wondering from both of you, what brought you to your different practices? And sort of the question I always think about is like, who led you down the paths, who guided you to where you are now? Could you talk about those people and how they introduced you to what you're doing, and kind of your process to training to where you each are now?
So I guess I'll start. I mean, one reason that I was drawn to photography, and I kind of think of myself as a multimedia artist, but really, the start is usually lens based. Is I guess the potential that photography has for telling stories, and for giving voice to maybe stories that haven't been told, and that need to be heard. And I mean, that's a direct, I can connect that directly to growing up on the Navajo Nation, on the reservation, and not being a fluent Navajo speaker, right? And so I kind of was constantly living in translation, and I wasn't really able to express myself in at least through language in a way that I really wanted to. But when I found photography, it became this, vehicle for me to kind of share my viewpoint, literally, with the world, right? And so I think that, for one thing, this notion of translation, kind of living in that space, is something that's kind of central to my practice, and wanting to be able to communicate just with my grandmother, who didn't speak English at all, to the rest of my family who were, I guess, curious about my perspective on things, but I wasn't really able to express them to the degree that I wanted to.
Did you have any thoughts you wanted to share, Ms. Marika?
About his conversation?
Oh, just about, if you could talk about who has kind of guided you down the path that you,
yes.
And your practice, and sort of how it's developed over the years, and sort of training that you've done.
Okay, yes. My grandmother is the one that helped in the birthing process of me. And so once I was born, she's the one that said, this is the one that will carry our medicine. And so my parents believed that I needed to be kept traditionally. And so the meaning of that means the education is really, very limited. It's only sitting and teaching only with the elders. and getting all ceremonies and songs and everything being handed down. I think the thing that makes me a little sad is that, one, there aren't very many medicine people, women. There's only about 3 of us, and I'm not sure who will carry my medicine. And that's why I teach, because I believe that I don't want to leave this earth without handing everything I can, as much as I can. But the hard part is the songs and the ceremonies. I don't, I'm not sure what I'll do with that. I love the plants. I talk to them. They talk to me. I understand how to work with the people. And that's why when Dell Medical School first came into Austin, they were pretty curious about why I still have so many clients seeing me. And they couldn't understand that. They couldn't understand the Hispanic community and other cultures that would come to see me, because they just felt like, well, this is weird. And they don't understand that in Mexico, integrative medicine's been going on for many, many years. And so they feel like, yes, we're going to go to a doctor, but then I'm going to also go to a medicine person and get some herbal teas to go along with it. And know that there's some ceremonies that are going to come along with it. And so that's why I started working with them. And so that's why I'm inside of a medical clinic. And so that's pretty exciting. And so when a doctor sees a patient, then they'll send them to me. And so from there, I start working with them and seeing how I can help. And so that's pretty amazing to me.
I think that leads to a question that you all have both touched on, but I'm wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit more about what it's meant for you to be able to connect with each other and to collaborate on this project and to see your work alongside each other. Has it taught you anything?
Well, I was, again, like I said, this is an honor. To me, it's always an honor when young people ask me to help on something. So, because I'm the old person, and literally the older person as in a mindset, I grew up differently. And so that's why when you talked to me about will and everything, and I was like, oh, okay. And so when we finally met, to me, that was important in itself, because one, it's about me putting my intention and my prayer together, and then making sure that I brought the right tea. And I wanted him to understand that we can grow kota here too. And it's just a different plant and it tastes a little bit different. And that's why when he sipped it, he was like, yes, you're right. This is really different. And I just thought what was truly amazing, and that's something that I went home and told everybody about, was the idea that we both are gifts to each other, because as Indians, we believe gift giving is a big deal, was pollen. And so to me, that was something that really threw me back. And I was like, wow, when he started talking about the pollen, and then he says, here's my gift to you. And I'm going, hang on a minute, let me go get my gift. And we're both show up with pollen. And to me, wow, how amazing was that? So anyway, I thank you both. And I know his journey is just starting.
I mean, it's an honor to work with Marika. And yeah, I mean, the pollen exchange, I think, is a great kind of
Yes.
the point, the pollen that I sourced,
Yes.
is really close to my heart, because
Right.
Rose Williams, who's in she lives in Tuba City, Arizona, which is the community that I'm from, and she farms, and it's really important to her to use non-GMO corn,
Yeah.
right? And to farm organically. She farms in the Curly Valley, which is just below Tuba City. And it's also an area where my grandfather had fields. And, that brings just up so many different issues for me. There aren't a ton of people who farm anymore in that region, and a lot of that land is kind of gone fallow. And it just makes me think a lot about how a food shed can become a food desert in a very short amount of time, which is a sad thing for sure. But then, there are people like Marika and people like Rose who have that knowledge, you know, they have that kind of, they embody that living history and that knowledge, and that, like, I think it's incumbent upon us to bring, you know, those people with these amazing kind of knowledge resources with younger people who are, you know, kind of dying for stuff to kind of feed them in terms of who they are, where they've come from, and food and the cultivation of plants is, I think, essential to that. I mean, I think there are a lot of really kind of exciting projects around indigenous food, around food sovereignty that are going on right now in different, you know, communities. But, you know, I to have like an art, like a sculpture become a platform for this kind of a conversation, I think is just, you know, I don't know, it's a remarkable opportunity, and you know, I'm so honored to have met Maria, and to have collaborated with her around, you know, these amazing beings that are in the sculpture now.
Yes, thank you.
Well, unless if you all have anything else you'd like to discuss amongst yourselves, now would be a great time, or we can move to audience questions. What do you think?
I would just say that it's really cool for me to see, like, I didn't actually get to see the plants in the installation when I was there, but to see them there now, and to see that kind of tour, and understand the space and how they're interacting is really amazing to me. And I feel like I need to get there and see it. Just because I can see, like, the photographs that are, you know, part of the installation too, behind those plants. And, you know, it's almost like the problem and the solution, and like the whole kind of story unfolding. I mean, I'll just say about that, like, there's an image in there of a place called Rare Metals that is now a Superfund site, and it's been remediated. And it is only about a mile upgrade from the Curly Valley watershed, where the pollen that, you know, we exchanged comes from. I think that one of the fears is that groundwater contamination will kind of leach the contamination from the rare metals site into that watershed, and potentially, you know, threaten that food shed area. And I don't think it's happened yet, and I think that's part of, you know, why it became a really important focus of remediation. But, you know, just to see that story kind of behind, you know, Marika's amazing plants, I don't know, for me, it really kind of fills out that story in a remarkable way, and it provides a solution, perhaps.
One thing I would like to say is what I love the most is that he combined both our pollens together and put them in the center of this circle, and it's just beautiful, and that means a lot. So thank you.
I should explain too, maybe, that like in that installation, there's this kind of geodesic sphere, and inside of that sphere, there's a big pile of corn pollen. And, you know, one issue that this installation is addressing is the legacy of uranium extraction and processing on the Navajo Nation, some of which happened during the development of the first nuclear weapon, right? And then afterwards during the Cold War, when we were kind of building our nuclear arsenal. And that, you know, Navajo people, I mean, it's an example of environmental racism, right? Like, we're not told of the dangers, even though the government was fully aware of the toxicity of working in these spaces. But the dome that makes the roof of the Pogon is a similar geometry to the explosive lens that the first atomic bomb kind of used, right? And at the core of that sphere was plutonium. But in this case, we've exchanged that, toxic substance for this life-giving substance. So it's kind of like the core of a beauty bomb as opposed to, a destructive.
And the symbol of fertility,
Mm.
because that's what pollen is really about. So, I think that was beautiful.
Great, thank you both again. I think at this point we have some audience questions, so we'll go ahead and move into that. The first one is for you, Ms. Marika. How can you differentiate between guajillo and mesquite?
The leaf and stem, if you can look at them carefully and look at them, it's also like the palo verde and the ratama. Right, a lot of people kind of get mixed up, but if you look at the stem of the leaf and the leaflets that come off, you can identify them.
Thank you. And then this next one is for you as well. You mentioned about how some plants are used for dream healing. Can you tell us more about how the relationship between the plant and dreams and how the dream healing works?
Wow, that's a long conversation. Okay, so in ceremonial beliefs, we believe that if I have a client that comes to me and we discuss the issue and I know that this cannot be healed in this physical world, then we're going to go into the dream world. So that it's a preparation. And so from there, it's telling this person what to pay attention to once they get ready to go to sleep, because I will meet them there and then we will work together to do the healing. Meantime, a consumption of these particular plants will take place.
Okay. So this next person says, I am so touched by this work. Thank you, Mr. Wilson and Ms. Alvarado. My question is, what can we say about the level of reciprocity between these beautiful plants and the spectator? Can Ms. Alvarado explain further what these beings understand from their encounter with the viewer in the gallery setting? And do they enjoy being looked at?
One that kind of went a little over my head, but I think I understand the ending. Yes, the plants love being paid attention to, believe it or not. I talk to a lot of the people that I work with and stuff, and I can be driving on the road and all of a sudden it's like they're yelling at me. They're like, I'm over here, I'm over here. So I have to pull off the road and go collect plants. But to me, it's really important to understand they are alive. And so that's why we consider the spirit of the plant when we do that ceremony or when we collect or harvest. It's really about honoring that plant. That's why we put that tobacco down. It's, asking permission that, one, this is collected in the right way because someone is going to ingest this. And so when you're ingesting it, you're taking the spirit of that plant.
Yeah, and I will say every time you come into the gallery or Evie comes into the gallery, I think a really important part of what you're doing is visiting with the plants and talking with them, making sure they're okay. And I know I try to do that when I go in as well. And it's, I think it's, they're beautiful. It's really helped them. And I'm grateful that you've modeled that so that I certainly have learned a lot in watching you interact with these living plants as well. So I'm grateful, thankful to you for that. I think that's all the questions we have right now. So do you all have any other questions for each other?
Kayla?
Yes.
So I have a question for the three of you.
Uh-oh.
No, first of all, I really want to join the audience in thanking you for this wonderful collaboration. That of you, Marika, that of you, Will, as well as Kayla. So, and I think it has been a great, beautiful collaboration.
Yes.
But in this kind of beautiful process, there are moments of tension, contradictions, issues. And it would be great if you elaborate on any of them that in the process made you think a lot about the very process you went through. I was a witness of some of those tensions because there was the timeline of the art history department and the art galleries schedule, and then and that's the sort of colonial institution in a way, which doesn't have too much dialogue with this kind of broader engagement with the land, with the plants, with the environment. So, and then also the agenda of the photographer and the art exhibition as a kind of more institutional setting, and then the role of the plants and what the plants were telling all of you in this process, and then your own relationship to the plants and to the university, Marika. So there were so many areas in which there was a kind of constant reclamation for conversation, for dialogue, for engagement, in the sense of a relationship or to the plants and to the environment as part of the process. So that's my question. If you can elaborate on some moments of tension or critical issues that made you think about the very nature of this process. So for Kayla,
Well, I'm happy to go first. And thank you for that question. I think it's something I've thought about a lot because this has been a massive learning process for me. As the curator of the exhibition, I think I approached it trying to design this collaboration between these two people. And I think I often let my voice lead the conversation when I should have been letting Marika and Will's voices lead the conversation. And that's something that I learned throughout. And I think we had some discussions about that. And I learned how to step back and sort of rebalance what my role was in this exhibition, because I really hope in my future curatorial work that I can be someone who sort of sets the stage for other people to collaborate on and to have conversations on. And so I think that was certainly, there were some moments where, and Ms. Marika mentioned this as well, with the plants being located inside. Initially, the exhibition had been designed with the plants outside, and there is a second air lab that is actually located in the courtyard of the gallery, and that's where the plants were initially going to go. And there were a lot of changes that happened, partly because of COVID. The timeline got changed. We initially were going to open in the fall of 2020, and we got pushed back a semester. And I know that that was very difficult for Ms. Marika and trying to talk with the plants and make sure that they were okay and going to survive through this really unnatural growing cycle. And I know that was, like I said, extremely difficult for her. And I think she pushed us to make sure the plants were inside and protected. And I think that that was absolutely the right decision. And I'm glad that we were able to keep them protected, especially with the storm a couple of weeks ago. So those are just a couple of moments that I'll mention. And if anyone else wants to kind of step in there, I'll let them.
Well, I think that's very true. And I think it was funny because we were all just kind of bumping around with each other. And it was difficult because the first conversation was, well, we're going to put all these plants in these black buckets and all of these kind of things. There were kind of a mesh buckets. And I was like, no, because then you're affecting the root system every time you're moving them and shifting them and stuff. And they need to be in containers. And so we were going back and forth on how to present everything. And to me, it was really important that people understand these are alive. These plants are alive and they can hear and they can sense and they can feel. And so that's why to me, it was so important about how we approach things. And then thank goodness for my apprentice, Evie. I made her start everything by seed that she could. And then from there, we started working for all the clippings and plants like that. So, and we kept losing plants along the way. And that's why, I kept telling Kayla all the time back and forth, I'm losing plants because it's too hard in the winter to keep things going. and everything. But I enjoyed meeting Will finally. And then I realized who he was and what his intention was with all of this work. And that really helps also. And so I think it was definitely a learning process with Kayla and I on how do we keep these plants available and safe. Thank you.
I mean, I think that's a really thought-provoking question, and it gets to maybe
Yes.
like more substantive like content, because contradiction and conflict, I think, and how you deal with that, like can lead to incredible insights, and so I would say that, like, from my perspective as like the artist, with a plan and a vision kind of preset, like when everything was shifted, because initially this was going to happen spring, summertime, and the plants would hopefully, I mean, the idea was they would thrive outside, and there is this other like sculptural element that is now kind of void of what it was supposed to hold. Like, I think inside of me there was something holding on to like my initial idea, like we can't change that, like this is the artist's vision can't be like messed with. But I think as soon as I met Marika and she offered me this tea and this pollen, and like I realized that I'd gotten ahead of myself just in thinking about stuff, and just like that kind of really intense generosity, I think, diffused this notion, like this artistic, heroic notion of I have to have my vision, which I don't think is something that I hold on to too much. I'm not that much of an art diva, but I do have strong kind of aesthetic ideas about where my work is going and what it might look like. But I think when we kind of got back to that notion of protocol and like dialogue, and like it just like dispelled that in me, and I was like, okay, this woman is an expert, she knows what she's doing, and she has made the effort to contribute these really important beings and her knowledge in relation to that. So just and nobody could have, I think, predicted that there was this like huge like Arctic vortex headed for Texas. But I'm so thankful that we figured out a really amazing solution. And I would also say that like it's just been like a dream to work with Kayla and her team, and Mackenzie and Mark Silva and his crew, because anything that we asked for, like they were able to provide, and they did it in such a like professional, high level manner that I don't know, it made everything easy, and assured me that it would be done with like really with care. And so
Thank you. And I will also add to the credit of the VAC, because we are a university art gallery, we're able to be a lot more flexible, I think, than some art institutions and displaying institutions, whereas typically art spaces are kind of seen as sterile, white boxes. You have like rules about what can go in. And I'm really glad that at the VAC, a lot of those things weren't necessarily concerned, and we were allowed to kind of get rid of protocol and figure out, okay, what's going to actually work best for this collaboration, and adjust to that, bring the plants inside without that being an issue. And so, yeah, I think I certainly, like I said, learned a lot. We all learned a lot. And I think there was a period, especially right before installation, where there were a lot of changes happening. And I'm glad that we were able to make them happen in a way that, there were some bumps, but I think we were all fairly happy with. All right, so I think with that, we should probably go ahead and close out. I want to thank you both again for being so involved and open in this project, for sharing your knowledge, your lives with us, and for being a major part of this exhibition and making it happen. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, well, thank you everyone for coming, and this will be posted online soon, so please make sure to share with your friends and come see the exhibition before it closes.
Bye.